Chapter 1. The Uneasy Calm. Carley Nichols had never been the type to second-guess herself. At 27, she prided herself on trusting her instincts, even when they led her into questionable shoe purchases or spontaneous road trips that ended in diners with sticky menus. But lately, her gut had been whispering something she couldn't ignore. Something's off. It wasn't obvious. Dean Allen hadn't changed, at least not in any way she could point to. He was still the same steady presence she'd fallen for 2 years ago. Solid. Grounded. The kind of man who didn't need to broadcast his worth because he knew it. Dean didn't play games. When he said something, it was the truth. No fluff, no theatrics. Just honesty. And Carley loved that about him. She loved that he didn't waste time with meaningless chatter. He wasn't introverted, just quiet by nature. A man who spoke when he had something worth saying. In a world full of noise, Dean was her calm. So why did she feel like the ground beneath that calm was shifting? Carley sat cross-legged on her couch, staring at the muted glow of her phone. Her best friend's engagement photo dominated the screen. A sparkling ring, 2 grinning faces, and a caption dripping with hashtags. Hashtag forever and always. Hashtag lucky girl. Hashtag ring goals. They'd been dating for a year. 1 year. Carley and Dean had been together for 2. 2 years of laughter, late-night takeout, and quiet mornings where his arm draped over her waist like it belonged there. And yet, no ring. No talk of rings. No talk of anything beyond next weekend's plans. She tossed the phone aside and flopped back against the cushions, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. It just had that weird stain from when she tried to make creme brulee and set off the smoke alarm. Dean had laughed so hard that night, his quiet chuckle turning into full-bodied laughter that made her heart flip. That was the man she loved, the man who made her feel safe, who didn't care about flashy or status, who cared about real. But her gut wasn't letting it go. Something was off. And if there was one thing Carley Nichols wasn't, it was self-doubting. She trusted her instincts. If they were sounding alarms, she was going to listen. She grabbed a throw pillow and hugged it to her chest, her mind spinning through possibilities like a bad game of roulette. Was Dean pulling away? Was he bored? Was she imagining things? Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just comparing herself to Jenna and her picture-perfect engagement. But then again, Jenna's fiancé had proposed after a year. A year. Carley and Dean were at 2, and the only rings in her life were the ones she wore for fashion. She groaned, burying her face in the pillow. "Stop spiraling," she muttered. But her brain didn't listen. It never did. Dean wasn't the type to make impulsive moves. He was deliberate, thoughtful. If he was planning something, he'd do it when he was ready. Carley knew that. She respected that. But lately, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something subtle, like a draft you can't see but feel anyway. She thought about the little things. How he'd been working late more often. How he seemed tired, distracted. Not distant exactly, just elsewhere. And when she asked about his day, his answers were shorter than usual. Not cold, just quiet. Carley sighed, rolling onto her back. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe she needed to chill. But then again, her gut had never steered her wrong before. And right now it was telling her one thing loud and clear. Something was off. And she needed to figure out what. She glanced at the clock. Dean would be home soon. Maybe tonight was the night she'd ask. Not in a dramatic, we need to talk way, just casually. Like, breezy. Like, hey, where do you see us in 5 years? Totally normal. Totally not terrifying. Carley snorted. Yeah, right? She sat up, smoothing her hair, her heart thudding with a mix of determination and dread. Because if there was one thing she knew for sure, it was this. Ignoring the feeling wasn't an option. She needed answers, and she was going to get them. Eventually. Chapter 2. The Truth According to Dad. Carley had always thought her father's study smelled like wisdom. Or maybe it was the leather-bound books and the faint trace of pipe tobacco that clung to the air like a memory. Tonight it smelled like answers, or at least she hoped it did. She curled her legs under her on the chair opposite him, her tea cooling in her hands. Her father sat back in his worn leather armchair, glasses perched on his nose, looking every bit the man who had seen enough life to know what mattered and what didn't. He didn't rush her. He never did. That was one of the things Carley loved most about him. His patience wasn't performative. It was genuine. "So," he said finally, his voice calm, "tell me what's bothering you." Carley exhaled slowly, the words tumbling out like marbles spilling from a jar. "I don't know, Dad. I feel like something's off with Dean. It's not obvious. He's not acting weird or anything. He's still the same. Steady, reliable, quiet. But," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "I guess I'm wondering what the next step is. We've been together for 2 years. My best friend just got engaged after 1 year. And I'm happy for her. I really am. But it made me think. What about us? Does Dean see a future with me? Or am I just here?" Her father listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Men like Dean," he said slowly, "show their love and commitment by how hard they work." Carley blinked. "What?" He smiled faintly. Every man works, Carley. But most spend their money on flashy cars, clothes, whatever lie will get them a date. Men like Dean? They work hard not for themselves, but for their future. Carley frowned, her fingers tightening around the mug. So, what does that mean for me? It means, her father said, what Dean needs from you isn't grand gestures or public proclamations. He needs quiet gratitude for how hard he's working. He doesn't need a pat on the back every day. But it's never a bad idea to let the person you see a future with know you appreciate them. Carley stared at him, his words sinking in like stones in water. I do appreciate him, she said softly. I guess I don't say it enough. The worst thing you can do with a man like Dean, her father continued, is make him feel like his effort isn't appreciated. Men like that won't stay where they're not appreciated. It messes up their purpose. The math stops working when he asks, why would I provide for someone who doesn't appreciate it? And he won't. Carley swallowed hard, her throat tight. So, you think he hasn't proposed because... Her father held up a hand, cutting her off gently. Because he hasn't met his wife yet. Carley blinked. Excuse me? He smiled kindly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. Most guys who'd make great husbands aren't looking for much. Love and respect, sure. But a close second is value versus risk. Risk, Carley echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Marriage is a risk, he said simply. If he chooses the wrong person, he risks half of everything he's built. That's not fear, that's reality. He's reading data and calculating risk. Carley's chest tightened. So he doesn't trust me? Her father chuckled, a warm, good-natured sound that eased some of the tension in her shoulders. It's not about trust or love. It's about making sure the math adds up. Carley stared at her tea, her thoughts spinning like a carousel she couldn't get off. So what do I do? Pay attention, he said. He's probably been telling you what he's looking for in little ways. Habits, patterns, how he reacts around your friends. It might be nothing, or it might be a warning sign. He leaned forward, eyes warm and steady. Want to know the secret to figuring it out in 5 minutes? Carley looked up, hopeful. Yes. Stop playing what-if games, he said gently. Sit down and talk to him. If you want to spend your life with him, you need to be able to talk and trust him. Carley nodded slowly, her father's words echoing in her mind like a mantra. Talk to him. Simple. Terrifying. Necessary. She rose from the chair, setting her mug on the side table. Her father stood too, pulling her into a hug that smelled like home and reassurance. You'll figure it out, he murmured. You always do. Carley smiled faintly against his shoulder, but her mind was already racing ahead to Dean, to the conversation she needed to have, to the truth she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Chapter 3, the conversation that doesn't happen. Carley had never been afraid of words. She could talk her way out of parking tickets, charm her way into sold-out concerts, and once convinced a barista to give her a free latte because the universe owed her caffeine. But tonight, words felt like bricks. Heavy, awkward, and impossible to stack into anything resembling a coherent sentence. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, rehearsing lines like an actor preparing for a role she didn't want. Dean, we need to talk. Too ominous. Dean, can we chat for a minute? Too casual. Dean, do you see a future with me, or am I just a placeholder until you find someone who alphabetizes her spice rack? Too psychotic. Carley groaned and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Why is this so hard? She muttered. Her reflection offered no answers, just a sympathetic tilt of the head. She'd decided after her talk with Dad that tonight was the night. No more what-if games. No more spiraling into scenarios where Dean left her for a woman who owned a golden retriever and baked sourdough on weekends. She was going to sit him down, look him in the eye, and have an honest conversation. Simple, terrifying, necessary. Dean was in the living room, stretched out on the couch, watching some documentary about bridges. Of course he was. The man loved bridges. Carley had once joked that if he ever left her, it would be for a suspension bridge with good curves. He'd laughed, kissed her forehead, and said, "You're ridiculous." She'd pretended not to melt. Carley took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and marched into the living room like a woman on a mission. "Dean," she began, her voice steady. "We need to..." The doorbell rang. Carley froze. Dean glanced up, remote in hand. "You expecting someone?" "No," she said through gritted teeth. "Are you?" He shook his head and rose, moving with that unhurried grace that made Carley want to scream and swoon at the same time. He opened the door, and Carley's stomach sank when she saw Mrs. Henderson from next door, clutching a casserole dish like it was a peace offering. "Evening," Mrs. Henderson chirped. "I made too much lasagna and thought you two could use a little extra." Dean smiled politely. "That's kind of you." Carley plastered on a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That's wonderful." Mrs. Henderson launched into a 10-minute monologue about her cat's dental surgery, during which Carley contemplated the ethics of faking a fainting spell to end the conversation. By the time the neighbor left, Carley's resolve had wobbled but not broken. She turned to Dean, ready to dive back in. "Dean, about what I was saying." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It's work. I need to take this. Carley watched him disappear into the kitchen, her frustration simmering like a pot left on high heat. She flopped onto the couch, glaring at the lasagna like it had personally conspired against her. 5 minutes later, Dean returned, phone tucked away. Sorry about that. It's fine, Carley said, forcing a smile. So listen, the smoke alarm shrieked. Carley jumped. Dean frowned. What? She bolted to the kitchen, where the lasagna sat in the oven, edges crisping like a crime scene. I thought it was cooked, she wailed, yanking it out and waving a dish towel at the alarm. Dean appeared beside her, calm as ever, pressing the reset button like he was defusing a bomb. You didn't check the timer? I didn't put it in the oven. Carley snapped, then winced. Sorry. I'm just, ugh. Dean studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. You okay? Carley opened her mouth to say no. I'm spiraling into an existential crisis about our future and my dad thinks you're calculating risk like a Wall Street analyst. But what came out was, fine. Totally fine. Dean nodded slowly, as if filing that away for later. Want to eat? Carley stared at the charred lasagna. Not really. They ended up ordering pizza, which arrived late because the delivery guy got lost. And by the time Carley had a slice in her hand, her grand plan felt like a deflated balloon. She tried 3 times to start the conversation, and the universe had thrown up roadblocks every single time. Maybe it was a sign. Maybe tonight wasn't the night. Dean stretched out on the couch again, flipping back to his bridge documentary. Carley curled up beside him, her head on his shoulder, her mind a storm of questions she couldn't seem to ask. Tomorrow, she promised herself. Tomorrow, she'd try again. Chapter 4, Enter the Curveball. Carley Nichols had a plan. A real, actionable, no-excuses plan. Tonight, she was going to talk to Dean. No interruptions, no lasagna emergencies, no existential spirals. Just 2 adults having an honest conversation about their future. That was the plan. The universe, however, had other ideas. It started with a text from her best friend, Jenna. At 8:03 a.m. Help. Florist cancelled. Need you. Bring coffee. Carley stared at the screen, groaning into her pillow. Jenna was knee-deep in wedding planning chaos, and Carley had been drafted as her unofficial maid of honor/therapist/human shield against vendors. She loved Jenna, truly, but today was supposed to be her day, the day she finally stopped playing emotional hide and seek with Dean. Still, Jenna's text had the urgency of a 5-alarm fire, and Carley wasn't heartless. She threw on jeans, grabbed 2 lattes, and drove across town, muttering under her breath about timing and fate and how she was going to have words with the universe later. When she arrived at the boutique flower shop, Jenna was pacing like a general preparing for battle. Her blonde hair was in a messy bun, her phone glued to her ear, and her expression screamed, I will burn this city down for peonies. Carley. Jenna spotted her and practically tackled her for the coffee. You're a lifesaver. I know, Carley said dryly, handing over the cup. Now tell me why I'm here instead of home practicing my we need to talk speech. Jenna waved a hand, still on the phone. Florist bailed. Said something about a family emergency. I'm trying to find a replacement before my mother has a meltdown and starts arranging centerpieces out of canned goods. Carley winced. That sounds festive. Don't, Jenna hissed, then hung up and blew out a breath. Okay, new plan. We're meeting a backup florist in 10 minutes. She's eccentric. Carley raised a brow. Define eccentric. Jenna grimaced. You'll see. 10 minutes later, Carley understood exactly what Jenna meant. The backup florist, whose name was Marigold, because of course it was a whirlwind of scarves, bangles, and opinions. Her shop looked like a botanical fever dream. Flowers spilling from every surface, wind chimes tinkling in the corners, and a faint smell of incense that made Carley wonder if she'd accidentally walked into a seance. Weddings, Marigold declared, sweeping toward them like a queen entering her court, are not about flowers. They are about energy, vibration, the sacred union of souls. Jenna blinked. Aha, so, do you have peonies? Marigold ignored the question, fixing Carley with a gaze so intense it felt like being x-rayed. You, she said, pointing a jeweled finger. You have questions. Carley startled. Me? Yes. Marigold floated closer, her bangles jingling like tiny bells. Your aura is restless. Your heart seeks clarity. Carley shot Jenna a look that said help me, but Jenna was too busy sipping her latte and pretending this wasn't happening. Carley began, but Marigold cut her off with a dramatic flourish. Men, she intoned, are like orchids. They require patience, gentle care, and sometimes a little sunlight to bloom. Carley blinked. Okay. You wonder why he hesitates, Marigold continued, eyes glittering. It is not fear. It is calculation. He weighs the soil, the water, the risk of frost. Carley's jaw dropped. Are you psychic? Marigold smiled mysteriously. I am observant. Jenna snorted into her coffee. Carley glared at her. So what do I do? Carley asked before she could stop herself. Marigold leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Stop waiting for the bloom. Tend the roots. Show him the garden you will grow together. Carley stared. That's poetic. It's practical, Marigold said, straightening. Now, about those peonies? By the time Carley escaped the shop, her head was spinning. Not just from the incense but from Marigold's words. Tend the roots. Show him the garden. It sounded like something her dad would say if he'd spent a summer at a meditation retreat. As she drove home, Carley replayed the conversation in her mind, wondering if maybe, just maybe, Marigold had a point. Dean wasn't flashy. He wasn't a man of grand gestures. He was steady, deliberate, thoughtful. Maybe he wasn't hesitating because he didn't love her. Maybe he was hesitating because he needed to know the foundation was strong. Carley gripped the steering wheel, determination sparking in her chest. Tonight, she was going to talk to him. No interruptions. No excuses. Just honesty. Unless, of course, the universe had one more curveball up its sleeve. Chapter 5 The Misread Signals. Carley Nichols was a woman on a mission. After her mystical pep talk from Marigold the florist, she felt armed with wisdom, albeit wrapped in incense and metaphors. Tend the roots. Show him the garden. Fine. She could do that. She'd be calm, appreciative, and maybe even sprinkle in a compliment about his jawline because, honestly, that jaw deserved recognition. She rehearsed her approach all afternoon. Nothing dramatic. No ultimatums. Just a simple, heartfelt conversation. She even bought Dean's favorite craft beer as a peace offering, because nothing said I value you like a six-pack of something brewed by a guy named Chad in a garage. By the time Dean walked through the door, Carley was ready. She'd lit a candle, queued up soft background music, and arranged herself on the couch in what she hoped was a casual but inviting pose. She looked like a woman who had her life together, or at least like a woman who hadn't spent 20 minutes Googling how to talk about commitment without sounding like a psycho. Hey, Dean said, stepping inside, his work boots heavy against the hardwood. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from a day spent wrangling blueprints and stubborn subcontractors. His shirt clung to his shoulders in a way that made Carley momentarily forget how to breathe. Hi, she said, smiling. How was your day? Long, he admitted, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. We had a delivery mix-up. Ended up hauling half the materials ourselves. Carley winced. That sounds exhausting. Dean shrugged, unbothered. Part of the job. He crossed to the fridge and Carley seized her moment. I got you something, she said brightly, holding up the six-pack like a trophy. Dean's brows lifted. Thanks. He took it, his expression warm but unreadable, and set it on the counter. Then he grabbed a water bottle instead. Carley blinked. Water? After I just bought artisanal beer? Was this a sign? A metaphor? Was he rejecting not just the beer but her entire attempt at connection? Her brain spun like a hamster on a wheel. Dean, she began, her voice steady despite the internal chaos. Can we? Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Talk for a minute? Dean glanced at her, then nodded slowly. Sure. Carley's heart thudded. This was it. The moment. She opened her mouth and froze when Dean said, Actually, can we do it later? I need to shower. I'm covered in dust. Carley swallowed her disappointment and nodded. Of course. Dean disappeared down the hall, and Carley collapsed onto the couch, her thoughts spiraling like a tornado in a teacup. He didn't want to talk. He didn't even take the beer. He's pulling away. Oh God. What if he's planning to break up with me? What if he's already met someone else? Someone who alphabetizes her spice rack and owns a golden retriever named Scout? By the time Dean returned, Carley had worked herself into a full-blown panic. She pasted on a smile as he sat beside her, smelling like soap and calm masculinity. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle. Me? Totally fine, Carley said, her tone about as convincing as a toddler claiming they didn't eat the cookie with crumbs all over their face. Dean studied her for a moment, then reached for the remote. You want to watch something? Carley stared at him, her internal monologue screaming. No, I want to know if you see a future with me or if I should start Googling apartments for one. What came out was, sure. Dean flipped to a documentary about bridges because of course he did, and Carley sat there, nodding absently while her brain staged a coup. Every quiet moment felt loaded. Every glance felt like a clue. When he stretched his arm along the back of the couch, she wondered if it was affection or habit. When he sighed, she wondered if it was fatigue or regret. By the time the credits rolled, Carley was convinced of two things. 1. Suspension bridges were architectural marvels. 2. Dean was definitely hiding something. Chapter 6. The big reveal. Almost. Carley Nichols had convinced herself that tonight was the night. Dean had invited her to his family dinner, a rare event, since his family gatherings were usually reserved for holidays or milestone birthdays. It wasn't his style to make a big fuss, so the fact that he'd said, come to dinner at my grandparents' place. Everyone will be there, had sent Carley's imagination into overdrive. Everyone. Family dinner. Grandparents. This had proposal written all over it. She spent an hour picking out the perfect outfit. Something chic but not, I'm expecting a ring. She settled on a soft green dress that hugged her curves without screaming bridal Pinterest board. Her hair behaved for once, and she even wore the necklace Dean had given her on their first anniversary. It felt symbolic, like a breadcrumb leading to the big moment. By the time Dean pulled up in his truck, Carley was practically vibrating with anticipation. He looked devastatingly handsome in a crisp button-down and jeans. His sleeves rolled up just enough to show forearms that could probably bench press a small car. Carley climbed in, her heart doing somersaults. "You look great," Dean said, his voice warm and easy. "Thanks," Carley replied, trying to sound casual while her brain screamed. "Is this the last time I'll ride in this truck as a girlfriend?" The drive was quiet, comfortable, except for the fact that Carley was mentally composing engagement announcements. She pictured the Instagram caption. "He asked. I said yes. Forever starts now." She even debated hashtags before reminding herself to breathe. Dean's grandparents' house was a sprawling ranch-style home with a porch swing and the kind of charm that made Carley want to bake pies and say things like "You'll come back now." Inside, the air smelled like roasted chicken and nostalgia. Family voices mingled in the kitchen, laughter spilling down the hall. Dean's grandmother enveloped Carley in a hug that smelled like lavender and sugar cookies. "So good to see you, sweetheart," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Dean talks about you all the time." Carley's heart soared. "Talks about me all the time? That's practically a prelude to a proposal." Dean's grandfather clapped him on the back, muttering something about keeping the Allen name strong, which Carley immediately interpreted as marry her and make babies. She was practically floating. Dinner was a lively affair. Platters of food, clinking glasses, stories that made Carley laugh until her cheeks hurt. Dean sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on her knee under the table, and every touch felt like a promise. Carley kept waiting for him to stand, clear his throat, and make the announcement that would change everything. And then it happened. Dean rose to his feet, lifting his glass. Carley's pulse skyrocketed. This was it. The moment. She straightened in her chair, her smile ready for the cameras that weren't there but would definitely be imagined later. "I just want to say," Dean began, his voice steady, "how grateful I am for all of you. Family means everything to me." Carley's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Here it comes. He's going to say my name. He's going to..." And, Dean continued, "I'm thrilled to share some exciting news." Carley's breath caught. Yes, this is it." Dean smiled. "My cousin Emily is pregnant." The room erupted in cheers. Carley blinked, her smile frozen like a wax figure. "Pregnant? Emily?" She clapped automatically, her palms stinging as reality crashed down like a poorly timed cymbal. Emily beamed from across the table, her fiancé grinning beside her. Everyone toasted, laughter filling the room. Carley forced a laugh that sounded like a dying squirrel. Dean sat back down, his hand returning to her knee. "You okay?" he murmured. "Perfect," Carley squeaked, her voice 2 octaves higher than normal. Inside, she was spiraling. She'd spent the entire day preparing for a proposal, and instead she got a pregnancy announcement for someone else. Her brain was a carnival of emotions. Disappointment, embarrassment, and a tiny, irrational urge to throw a dinner roll at Emily just for existing. By dessert, Carley had composed herself enough to smile without looking like she was suppressing a scream. Dean chatted easily with his uncle about construction projects, oblivious to the existential meltdown happening 2 feet away. On the drive home, Carley stared out the window, her thoughts a tangled mess. She wasn't angry, not really. She loved Dean. She loved his family. But she couldn't shake the question echoing in her mind. If he wanted forever with me, wouldn't he have said something by now? Dean glanced at her, his brow furrowing. "You're quiet." Carley forced a smile. "Just tired." He nodded, accepting that at face value. But Carley knew the truth. She wasn't tired. She was terrified. Because tonight had shown her something she couldn't ignore. She wanted answers. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could wait. Chapter 7, The Unexpected Guest. Carley Nichols had one goal for Saturday morning. Avoid spiraling into another mental game of does Dean secretly want to marry me or is he planning to join a monastery? She'd promised herself a calm, drama-free day, coffee, errands, maybe a little online shopping for throw pillows she didn't need. Simple, predictable. The universe, as usual, laughed in her face. It started at the cafe. Carley had just settled into her favorite corner table with a latte and a blueberry scone when a voice behind her said, "Carley Nichols? Is that you?" She turned, and her jaw nearly hit the table. Standing there, grinning like he'd just stepped out of a college yearbook, was Ryan Matthews. Ryan, as in Ryan from sophomore year philosophy class. Ryan who once serenaded her with a ukulele at a frat party. Ryan who had been her almost something before life intervened. Ryan. Carley blinked, her brain scrambling to catch up. "Wow. Hi." He looked annoyingly good. Tall, tan, with that same easy smile that had made half the campus swoon. His hair was shorter now, his jawline sharper. But the charm? Still lethal. "I thought that was you," Ryan said, sliding into the chair across from her without asking. "You look amazing." Carley laughed awkwardly. "Thanks. You too." Inside, her thoughts were doing cartwheels. Of all the cafes in all the towns in all the world, he walks into mine? She glanced at her phone, half expecting the universe to text her. You're welcome for the plot twist. So, Ryan said, leaning back casually. What's new? It's been, what, 8 years? Something like that, Carley said, sipping her latte to buy time. I'm good. Living here, working in marketing. You? Traveling, Ryan said with a grin. I run a consulting firm now. Lots of international clients. Keeps me busy. Of course it did. Ryan had always been the adventurous type. The guy who backpacked through Europe while Carley spent her summer interning at a local magazine. He'd been a whirlwind then, and apparently he still was. That's great, Carley said, smiling politely while her brain screamed, do not flirt. You have a boyfriend. A wonderful, steady, jaw-droppingly handsome boyfriend who builds bridges and probably trusts you not to lose your mind over a blast from the past. Ryan's gaze softened. You look happy. Carley hesitated. I am, she said, and it was true mostly. She loved Dean. She loved their life. But the question lurking in the back of her mind, where is this going, made her voice wobble just enough for Ryan to notice. Someone special? He asked, his tone casual but curious. Carley nodded quickly. Yes, Dean. He's amazing. Ryan smiled, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of nostalgia, maybe. Good. You deserve that. Carley's heart did a weird flip, and she hated it. This was ridiculous. She wasn't in college anymore. She wasn't that girl who got butterflies because a guy played her favorite song on a ukulele. She was a grown woman in a committed relationship. A relationship she wanted to last forever. So why did this feel like a test? They chatted for another 20 minutes. Safe topics, light jokes, nothing dangerous. When Ryan finally stood to leave, he flashed that grin again. It was great seeing you, Carley. Maybe we'll run into each other again. Maybe, Carley said, forcing a smile. As he walked out, Carley exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. She stared at her scone, appetite gone, her mind spinning like a carousel of guilt and confusion. She wasn't tempted, not really. But seeing Ryan had stirred something she didn't want to admit. A longing for clarity. For certainty. For the kind of bold, unmistakable gesture that said, you're it. Forever. Dean wasn't Ryan. He wasn't flashy or impulsive. He was steady, deliberate, thoughtful. And Carley loved that about him. But as she sat there, watching the door swing shut behind a ghost from her past, she couldn't help wondering, what if steady isn't enough? Chapter 8, The Honest Talk. Carley Nichols had reached her breaking point. Not the dramatic, throw-a-vase kind of breaking point. She wasn't that girl. But the quiet, simmering kind, where every unanswered question felt like a pebble in her shoe. She'd spent the last week replaying her father's advice, Marigold's mystical metaphors, and Ryan's unexpected cameo like a highlight reel of emotional chaos. And through it all, one truth had crystallized. She needed answers. From Dean. Tonight. No more rehearsed speeches in the bathroom mirror. No more cosmic signs or waiting for the perfect moment. She was done with perfect. She wanted real. Dean was in the kitchen when Carley walked in, sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with flour. He was making pizza from scratch because of course he was. The man could build a bridge and a dinner without breaking a sweat. Carley paused in the doorway, watching him knead dough with the kind of focus that made her heart ache. Smells amazing, she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Dean glanced up, his smile easy. Figured we'd do homemade tonight. Carley nodded, stepping closer. Can we talk while you do that? Sure, he said, wiping his hands on a towel. What's up? Carley took a deep breath, her pulse thudding like a drum. Dean, where do you see us going? Dean froze, towel in hand, his brows lifting slightly. Going? Yeah, Carley said, words tumbling out now. We've been together for 2 years. I love you. I love what we have. But I need to know if you see a future with me, or if I'm just here. Dean stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Carley's stomach twisted. She hated silence. Silence was where her imagination threw wild parties. Finally, he spoke. Carley, you think you're just here. I don't know what to think, she admitted, her voice cracking. You don't talk about the future. You don't talk about marriage. And I'm not saying I need a ring tomorrow, but I need to know if that's even on your radar. Dean set the towel down, his movements deliberate. Sit, he said gently, nodding toward the counter. Carley perched on a stool, her heart pounding. Dean leaned against the opposite counter, arms crossed. Not defensive, just thoughtful. I'm not great with words, he began, his voice calm. You know that. I do, Carley said softly. But that doesn't mean I don't think about the future, he continued. I think about it every day. Carley blinked. You do. Dean nodded. When I'm at work, planning projects, I'm not just building for clients. I'm building for us. For the life I want with you. Her throat tightened. Then why haven't you said anything? Dean exhaled slowly. Because I wanted to be ready. Not just emotionally, financially, practically. I've seen what happens when people rush into marriage without thinking. It's not about fear. It's about making sure I can give you the life you deserve. Carley's eyes stung. Dean, I don't need perfect. I just need you. His gaze softened, and for the first time that night, he smiled. A quiet, steady smile that melted every knot in her chest. "You have me," he said simply. "Always." Carley laughed through her tears, swiping at her cheeks. "God, I've been spiraling for weeks." Dean chuckled, stepping closer. "I noticed." "You did?" she asked, incredulous. "Yeah," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You get this look when you're overthinking, like you're trying to solve a math problem without numbers." Carley groaned. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I figured you'd tell me when you were ready," he said, his voice warm. "And now you have." Carley stared at him, her heart full and light all at once. "So, marriage is on the table?" Dean's smile widened. "It's not just on the table. It's in the plans." Carley blinked. "Plans?" Dean nodded. "I've been working extra hours for a reason. Saving for a house. For us." Carley's breath caught. "Dean." He kissed her then. Slow, sure, like a man who didn't need grand gestures to prove his love. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Stop doubting," he murmured. "You're it for me." Carley laughed softly, relief washing over her like sunlight after rain. "You know, my dad said men like you show love by how hard they work." Dean smirked. "Smart man." "He also said to stop playing what-if games and just talk to you," she added. Dean chuckled. "Even smarter." Carley grinned, her heart steady for the first time in weeks. The conversation she dreaded had turned into the moment she'd been waiting for. Not flashy, not scripted, but real. And that was all she'd ever wanted. Chapter 9, The Turning Point. Carley Nichols woke up the next morning feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The conversation with Dean had been everything she needed. Honest, steady, reassuring. No fireworks, no dramatic declarations, just truth. And for Carley, truth was better than any grand gesture. She padded into the kitchen, hair in a messy bun, wearing one of Dean's old t-shirts that smelled faintly of soap and sawdust. Dean was already there, sipping coffee and scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up when she entered, his smile slow and warm, the kind of smile that made her want to bottle the moment and keep it forever. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Carley replied, stealing a sip of his coffee before grabbing her own mug. "You know, I slept like a rock." Dean chuckled. "Good. You needed it." Carley leaned against the counter, watching him. For the first time in weeks, her mind wasn't spinning with what-ifs. She wasn't wondering if he saw a future with her. She knew he did. He'd told her. He'd shown her. And now, she could finally stop obsessing and start appreciating. She thought about what her dad had said about gratitude, about paying attention. Dean wasn't a man of words. He was a man of actions. Every late night at work, every extra hour he put in, every quiet gesture was his way of saying, "I'm building something for us." And Carley realized she'd been so busy looking for signs that she'd missed the ones already there. She crossed to him, looping her arms around his waist. "You know," she said softly, "I'm really proud of you." Dean blinked, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," Carley said, resting her head against his chest. "For how hard you work. For how much you care. I don't say it enough, but I see it. And I appreciate it." Dean's arms tightened around her, his voice low. "That means more than you know." Carley smiled against his shirt, feeling the truth of that settle deep in her bones. This quiet, steady love was what she wanted. What she'd always wanted. And then the dog happened. It started with a bark. A loud, frantic bark that made Carley jerk upright like someone had set off an alarm. She glanced toward the window just in time to see a blur of fur streak across the yard. "Is that?" she began, but Dean was already moving, his coffee abandoned. They burst out the back door to find a golden retriever, because of course it was a golden retriever, tearing through the yard like it was training for the canine Olympics. It had a leash trailing behind it and a look in its eyes that said, "Freedom or death." "Where did it come from?" Carley yelped, dodging as the dog barreled past her. Dean scanned the street. Gates open. Must have gotten loose. Before Carley could respond, the dog made a beeline for the garden, plowing through Dean's carefully planted herbs like a furry wrecking ball. Basil flew. Rosemary toppled. Carley shrieked, "Dean, your plants." Dean lunged, but the dog was faster, darting toward the porch and leaping onto the swing like it owned the place. Carley clapped a hand over her mouth, torn between horror and hysterical laughter. "Okay," Dean said, his voice calm but tight. "We need to catch it." Carley nodded, adrenaline surging. "Right? How?" Dean grabbed the trailing leash and missed by an inch. The dog bolted again, this time toward the street. Carley sprinted after it, her bare feet slapping the pavement, her bun unraveling like a tragic rom-com heroine. "Stop!" she yelled, as if the dog spoke English. Spoiler, it did not. Neighbors peeked out their windows as Carley and Dean chased the runaway retriever down the block, looking like two people auditioning for a reality show called Love and Leashes. Finally, Dean managed to snag the leash, his grip firm as the dog skidded to a halt, panting happily like this had been the best day of its life. Carley bent over, gasping for breath. "Whose dog is this?" Dean checked the tag. "Name Scout. Figures." Carley groaned. "Of course it's Scout. The golden retriever from my nightmares." Dean laughed, his arms sliding around her shoulders as they walked back toward the house, Scout trotting beside them like an unrepentant criminal. You okay? Carley shot him a look, her hair wild, her shirt streaked with dirt. Define okay. Dean grinned. You look cute. Carley snorted. I look like I lost a fight with a tumbleweed. Dean squeezed her shoulder. Still cute. Carley rolled her eyes, but her heart melted anyway, because this ridiculous, chaotic moment was proof of something she'd been searching for all along. Life wasn't perfect. Love wasn't perfect. But with Dean, even the mess felt like home. By the time they returned Scout to its grateful owner, Carley was laughing so hard her stomach hurt. Dean laughed too. That quiet, deep laugh that made her want to kiss him senseless. And she did, right there on the porch, dirt and all. Because if there was one thing Carley Nichols knew now, it was this. Steady didn't mean boring. It meant strong. It meant lasting. It meant that when life threw curveballs or runaway dogs, you had someone who chased them with you. And that was everything. Chapter 10 The Grand Gesture. Carley Nichols had always imagined proposals as cinematic moments. Twinkling lights, sweeping music, maybe a dramatic sunset. But if the past few weeks had taught her anything, it was that life with Dean Allen didn't need a script. It wasn't about flash. It was about real. And real, as it turned out, looked like a quiet Saturday morning in their kitchen. Sunlight spilling through the windows, and Dean humming under his breath while he worked on something at the table. Carley patted in, still in her pajamas, hair a mess, feeling blissfully content. The chaos of the runaway dog, the emotional roller coaster of family dinners, the spirals of doubt, they all felt like distant echoes now. She'd had her talk. She had her answers. And for the first time in weeks, her heart was steady. Morning, she said, reaching for the coffee pot. Dean glanced up, his smile slow and warm. Morning. Carley poured herself a cup, then noticed what he was doing. Blueprints were spread across the table, but not the usual ones for bridges or office buildings. These were smaller, more personal lines and measurements that looked suspiciously like a house. What's this? She asked, curiosity sparking. Dean hesitated, then pushed one of the sheets toward her. Plans. Carley frowned, scanning the page. For? A house, Dean said simply. Our house. Carley's breath caught. Dean, I bought the land last month, he continued, his voice calm but his eyes bright. It's near the lake, quiet, plenty of space for whatever you want. A garden, a porch swing, a kitchen big enough for all the baking experiments you keep threatening to try. Carley stared at him, her heart swelling so fast it hurt. You did this? Dean nodded. I wanted to make sure we had a foundation before I asked you the next question. Carley blinked, her pulse thudding like a drum. What question? Dean reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Plain, simple, no frills. He opened it to reveal a ring that was exactly what she would have chosen herself. Elegant, timeless, nothing flashy, just real. Carley Nichols, he said, his voice steady. Will you marry me? For a moment, Carley couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision, her throat tight with emotion. This wasn't a grand gesture in the traditional sense. No fireworks, no choreographed speeches, but it was perfect. Because it was him. Because it was them. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, laughing through her tears. Yes, of course, yes. Dean slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands warm and sure. Carley threw her arms around him, kissing him like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Because maybe she had. When they finally pulled back, breathless and grinning, Dean brushed a thumb over her cheek. You okay? Carley laughed, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. I'm more than okay. I'm home. Dean smiled, that quiet, steady smile that had undone her from the start. Good, because this is just the beginning. They spent the rest of the morning sprawled on the couch, blueprints scattered around them, dreaming out loud. Carley talked about paint colors and herb gardens. Dean talked about sturdy beams and natural light. It was everything she'd ever wanted, not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. And as Carley traced the lines of their future on paper, she realized something her dad had been right about all along. Men like Dean didn't need grand gestures. They didn't need flash or fanfare. They needed trust. They needed gratitude. They needed someone who saw the value in quiet strength. Carley smiled, her fingers brushing the ring on her hand. She'd spent weeks wondering if Dean saw a future with her. Turns out he'd been building it all along. Chapter 11 Pinterest versus Reality. Carley Nichols had always imagined wedding planning as a graceful dance, soft music, champagne, and tasteful mood boards. Reality, it was a demolition derby of opinions, invoices, and existential crises about napkin colors. 3 weeks after Dean's proposal, Carley sat at her dining table surrounded by swatches, vendor brochures, and a laptop that had 27 tabs open. Jenna, her best friend and maid of honor, was perched across from her, sipping wine like it was her job. Okay, Jenna said, scrolling through Pinterest. Rustic chic or modern minimalism? Carley groaned. I don't know. I just want it to look nice. Nice. Jenna gasped. Carley, this is your wedding, not a PDA bake sale. Carley buried her face in her hands. Dean doesn't care about napkin colors. He just wants good food and a sturdy dance floor. Men, Jenna muttered, clicking another photo. They don't understand the emotional weight of centerpieces. Carley peeked through her fingers. Do centerpieces have emotional weight? Yes, Jenna said solemnly. They set the tone. Before Carley could respond, her phone buzzed. It was Dean. Need you to approve something for the house plans. Also, do we really need a chocolate fountain? Carley laughed out loud. He's questioning the chocolate fountain. Jenna gasped. Tell him it's non-negotiable. Carley typed back. Yes, we need it. It's a symbol of abundance and joy. Dean replied with a single emoji, face with rolling eyes. Carley grinned, her stress melting a little. Because even in the chaos, Dean was her calm, her steady, her reminder that this wasn't about napkins or fountains, it was about them. Chapter 12, The Rehearsal Disaster. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be simple. A warm-up, a chance for everyone to run through the motions and enjoy a nice meal. Instead, it was a sitcom episode waiting for syndication. First, the florist, Marigold, naturally, arrived with centerpieces that looked like miniature rainforests. They radiate abundance, she declared, sweeping into the venue like a mystical hurricane. Then Jenna tripped over a chair and spilled an entire glass of red wine on Carley's ivory dress. It's fine, Jenna shrieked, dabbing frantically. Wine is festive. Carley stared at the spreading stain. Festive isn't the vibe I was going for. Meanwhile, Dean's cousin brought his new girlfriend, a woman named Star who insisted on reading everyone's aura before dessert. You too, she said, pointing at Carley and Dean, are glowing with commitment energy. Dean leaned over and whispered, Is that good? Carley whispered back, I think so. By the time dessert arrived, a cake that was supposed to say love always but instead read love always. Carley was laughing so hard her cheeks hurt. Because yes, it was chaos. Yes, it was imperfect. But it was theirs. And that made it perfect. Chapter 13, The Toast. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, as if the universe had finally decided to cooperate. Carley stood at the edge of the aisle, her heart pounding, her dress pristine, thanks to a miracle dry cleaner, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. When the music started and she walked toward Dean, everything else fell away. The stress, the chaos, the Pinterest boards. All she saw was him. Steady. Sure. Hers. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Vows spoken softly. Promises sealed with a kiss that felt like forever. And then came the reception. And the toast Carley would never forget. Epilogue, the toast. The reception was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft glow of string lights draped across the garden. Carley sat beside Dean at the head table, her hand resting in his, her heart still humming from the vows they'd exchanged. The chaos of planning, the spirals of doubt, the runaway dog. It all felt like a distant memory now. Tonight was perfect, not because everything went smoothly, but because it was theirs. When her father rose to speak, the room quieted instantly. He wasn't a man who loved the spotlight, but when he spoke, people listened. Carley felt her throat tighten as he lifted his glass, his eyes finding hers with that familiar mix of strength and tenderness. I'm not much for speeches, he began, his voice steady, carrying just enough humor to draw a ripple of laughter. But I've got a few things to say about love, and about these two right here. He glanced at Dean, his expression warm but firm. Dean, when Carley first told me about you, I knew you were different. Not because you were flashy or loud, because you weren't. You were steady. You were real. Men like you don't waste time with games. They build. They work. They show their love in ways that don't always make headlines, but they make homes. And that matters. Carley blinked back tears, her fingers tightening around Dean's. Her father turned to her, his smile softening. Carley, you've always trusted your gut. You've always known what you wanted, and you found it. You found a man who doesn't just talk about the future. He builds it. And you've built something too. A partnership that's rooted in trust, respect, and a whole lot of laughter. He paused, lifting his glass higher. Marriage isn't about grand gestures. It's about the little things, the quiet moments, the steady hands, the work you put in every day. Keep talking, keep listening, and never forget to appreciate each other. Because love isn't math, but if you do it right, the numbers always add up. The room erupted in applause, glasses raised high. Carley's heart swelled as her father smiled at her one last time, his eyes saying what words couldn't. You've got this. Dean leaned close, his voice low and sure. He's right, you know? Carley laughed softly, blinking away tears. He usually is. And as they clinked their glasses and kissed under the glow of the lights, Carley realized something she'd known all along. Love wasn't about perfect timing or flawless plans. It was about choosing each other every day in every way. Forever had already begun.